what I'd like to do is take them up next week, especially because you want to have time to look over the materials carefully. The exam consists of 2 essay questions that have multiple parts to them. And there are 2 questions. And for each set of questions, you need to write a page and a half. A page and a half times 2 questions equals 3 pages, right? And the length of your answers for each set of questions should be between a page and a half and 2 pages, and really no more and no less than that. Does that clear it up?
Yes.
Okay.
Mute, currently unmuted.
Okay.
Hi, Professor.
Charity, yes.
Yeah, my book is an audio book, so it will be difficult for me to take a shot. I download it from Bookshare.
Yeah. So just take a picture of the little download, whatever it is. It doesn't matter.
It's on a device. You know, I'm visually impaired, so it's on a device.
Okay, just send me, a message, and I'll remember our conversation. That's fine.
Professor, I have the same thing. I have on my phone as a PDF.
You can take a screenshot of your phone and send it to email.
So I'm gonna take a screenshot of the front cover of the PDF and send it to you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And then that's how you know I have those 3 books.
Yeah. I mean, every semester students have e versions of these things. That's fine. Yeah,
Perfect.
that's not that complicated.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other urgent questions?
And for the exam, you want 3 pages, right? A page
3
and a half.
pages total for the whole thing.
And then a page and a half for the first part and a page and a half for the second part.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. And remember, I've given you all the information. So let me say for sections 09 and 12, I had some problems posting the exam itself. So I emailed it to you. I've talked to the tech people. I've been having problems for a month and a half with posting things on Blackboard for certain reasons that remain a mystery. And even the tech guy couldn't explain it. But I think he's tweaked things to allow me to put the file right in the assignment folder for the midterm where it belongs, which is where it should be. So I will try to put that up tomorrow in the first half of the day, but it has been emailed out to you. And I'd strongly suggest, before you get any further, look at the test paper carefully. The first page is instructions. The second part is the questions. First page instructions, second part is the questions. And then I've provided 2 videos, and the 2 videos correspond to those 2 pages. Number 1 deals with general directions. And when I talk about directions for the exam, what I'm really doing is providing you a rubric, that fancy term that just explains what I'm going to be looking for when I grade your exam, and what I'm expect to find, in order to get the best grade possible. Right. So one video deals with the directions, the other deals explicitly with the questions. So once you tackle all that material, it really should answer most of your questions. It normally does for most students. There's always something, that someone wants clarification on. And next Wednesday, if you want to spend some time just going over those questions, that's the time to do it. Like I've said, if it ends up you need an extension, you got to have a real reason to need an extension, and you also have to get to me. You have to let me know in advance. You can't send me a note on the day that it's due and said, "Oh my God, I've been so crazy busy with work and everything." And well, you would have known that in advance, and you should have let me know. So it's really important. Obviously, I will accept late exams, but if there's no justifiable excuse, they're going to be marked down. And my guess is everybody who's here attending and taking the time to attend is going to be on top of getting in their exam on time.
Sorry, Professor.
Go for it.
Just a quick, where did you say that you put the videos about the explanation?
They're in the midterm folder, which should be visible as
Oh,
of,
okay.
as of this morning.
Oh, okay. All right. No problem.
Yeah. Okay, let's get going because we got a lot of business to cover and everything here deals with the exam. Okay. So what we want to look at today, we finished up this discussion of talking about human nature a little bit, talking about the significance of relationships for Aristotle, clarifying exactly what he meant by happiness. And we established one basic, really important connection. Ethics has to do essentially with the science of human happiness, the science of human happiness. Friendship occupies an absolutely essential role within this book, this treatise called The Ethics, which deals with the science of human happiness. Therefore, we know that happiness is absolutely instrumental in a human being, as Aristotle understands it, achieving our happiness. We need friends, we need friendship in order to be happy. So it seems for Aristotle, right? What is achieving happiness? Well, we have this whole hierarchy of goods in our lives, starting out with our health and money and a house and a job and education and family and friends and all these different types of goods, goods of the body, goods of the soul, and external goods, which are just things external to you that you want and need in order to achieve your happiness. They're all means to an end. They're all tools that you need in order to achieve your happiness. The big question, of course, the big question is, in what capacity, what role do friends and the friendship as a relationship, what role do they play in you achieving your happiness? What role do they actually play? Now, here's the tricky thing. We all have our own personal conception of happiness, regardless of what poor old Aristotle says. And we all have our own conception of how our own friends, our friendships, our relationships, the people we love, contribute to our happiness. The point is, Aristotle has a slightly different conception of happiness, and therefore he has a slightly different role that friends are going to play in order for us to achieve our happiness. In a nutshell, what is happiness for Aristotle? We talked about this last week and kind of really nailed this down. In a nutshell, what is happiness for Aristotle? If we want to understand what the role friends play in achieving our happiness, we need to understand what happiness is. And at this point, it should be academic. What is happiness for Aristotle? Don't all speak at once.
Living through virtue.
Yes, living virtuously. What does that really mean to live virtuously?
Excellence.
Yes, these are fancy words used in a kind of technical way. But remember what he says in book 1, chapter 7. He says, happiness is activity in accord with virtue. And if there are many virtues, the best and most complete one. Or he describes it as rational activity, right? That's just a fancy way of saying that happiness is living virtuously. And the reason that it's rational activity is because for Aristotle, the human identity is primarily identified with our powers of reasoning, and that we don't live any kind of life. We don't live the life, we have similarities with other higher mammals, but we don't live the life of simply an animal existence. We live a rational existence, which is simply to say we have the powers of reasoning to guide and direct ourselves, to guide us and direct us in our lives. So therefore we live a rational existence rather than a merely animal one, right? So therefore our happiness is going to be found in using that tool that is distinct to human nature and human life, which is our reason, right? So living virtuously actually means living excellently, taking all of our natural faculties, our capacities, our abilities, and using them to their fullest. In the same way an athlete takes their raw potential and trains and works hard to win the Super Bowl, and they start on day one of training camp. And of course, they've been playing for years already. And on day one of training camp, they say, 10 months from now, I want to win the Super Bowl. And if I want to win the Super Bowl, which is, an analogy for happiness, the question becomes, what do I have to do today? Right? Today, I have to run all these sprints. I have to get up at 5 in the morning and lift all these weights. Then I have to go to the study. I follow NFL football a little bit. So you go to the study room and you learn all the tape on your opponents and blah, blah, blah. And you work on your weaknesses and so on and so forth, right? For Aristotle, we've said it and everybody gets it, I think, at this point. Happiness is work. Happiness is an achievement. Happiness is taking your life in your own hands and making the most of what your life is and who you are. And those two things are kind of the one and the same, right? So we've discovered that happiness is living virtuously, but there are two types of virtue. What are the two types of virtue we've talked about now for 2 weeks? Two types of human excellences. Excellences of the human soul, not the body. They're rational excellences. What are the two types of virtue Aristotle talks about?
Moral and intellectual.
Yeah, moral and intellectual. And how is reason connected in with moral and intellectual virtue? Well, there's no way that you can achieve moral virtue or intellectual virtue without the use of your reason in some form or another. And in book 6, which we're not focusing on here because it's just we can't cover this whole book, but it's all his whole argument knits together throughout the entire text. In book 6, he talks about all the different types of reasoning that a human being does. And we talked about it a little last week. There's practical reasoning, things like wisdom or prudence, and the Greek word is phronesis. And it has to do a type of reasoning, a type of thinking that helps us to make practical decisions that determine how we act, both toward ourselves and to other people. If you think about what moral action is, basically it's acting in the right or wrong way relative to yourself or relative to the other people. Of course, you can do the wrong things for yourself just as much as you can do the wrong thing to another person, right? And it's practical reasoning that helps to guide you in your actions, starting with your choices that then result in actions that allows you to do the right thing rather than the wrong thing. Then there's this thing called intellectual virtue, another virtue of the soul. Does anyone remember what that's all about? Intellectual virtue. Does intellectual virtue have to do with the way you act toward other people morally?
Is that practical wisdom?
No. Moral virtue is all about practical wisdom, practical reasoning. Wisdom by definition is practical. Wisdom by definition is a type of intelligence that's geared toward making decisions. The word practice, the Greek word, it actually comes from the Greek praxis, and praxis has to do with action. It has to do with doing things. Moral virtue and practical reasoning has to do with doing things, how you act relative to right and wrong, good and bad, moral questions. Intellectual virtue is not about acting. It's about what? It's not about figuring out, it's not about using your rational powers to figure out what the right thing to do is. Intellectual virtue is about using your rational powers in order to do what? Pardon?
To contemplate.
To contemplate. All right, so that's Aristotle's word. The highest virtue, the highest human virtue that Aristotle identifies in Book 10 is called, in Greek, it's theoria. And it's where we get our word like theoretical or theory. And theoria means contemplation. Okay, that's contemplation. Nobody uses that word. What is he really talking about when he's talking about intellectual virtue? What's the language we would use?
Pleasure.
It's about thinking, but thinking for what purpose? If it's not thinking for action, what is it thinking for?
Being happy.
It's going to allow you to achieve happiness, but it's thinking in a certain way about certain things and not other things. Now, it's not about decision making. I've just made clear that that's practical. That's practical reasoning connected with moral virtue. It's not about actions. Decision making, a decision is all about choosing to take an action of one kind or another. Intellectual virtue does not involve you acting toward other people. It involves you doing something else. And you're all familiar with what it is, but I don't think you can imagine that this is Aristotle's understanding of happiness. When Aristotle says that happiness is the act of contemplation and I'll use the word reflection as well, because they're related. What are we really talking about here?
Decision.
No. That's practical reasoning.
Regulation.
No, come on, folks. You all know this, but you just can't believe this is, you know what it is? You cannot believe that this is Aristotle's definition of happiness. We talked about it last week too. Tell me what the 3 lives are again. The 3 lives are the life of bodily pleasure, the life of honors, which Aristotle identifies with being involved in politics, because for him, politics is not about advancing a political ideology for the benefit of we the people. It's about a person who is ambitious going out in public and getting recognition from others. We talked about recognition last class. What's the 3rd life that he talks about in Book 1, Chapter 5?
Philosophy.
Yes. In a street layman terms, simple terms, what is the philosophy about, or what is the life of philosophy consist of? Yes, he says it consists of contemplation. It's synonymous with the life of contemplation. What do you do when you contemplate? What is that all about? Put that in ordinary language for me, please, and for everybody else here.
Life of reflection.
Yeah, but that's a synonym. Reflecting on what? What do you actually do?
Reasoning.
Yeah, but you do that to achieve moral virtue as well. What kind of reasoning is involved? What does it all result in? Since it doesn't result in an action that we would call moral. It's theoretical. We're getting closer. And it's not really about regulation so much, because moral virtue is all about regulating your impulses so you act the right way rather than the wrong way.
It's like knowledge, understanding.
Yes. Full stop. Intellectual virtue involves using your reason to understand the world around you. And Aristotle's word for the object of understanding, he just calls it nature. The Greek word for nature is physis. It's where we get our word physics. What is it that the philosopher seeks to know? I mean, in a sense, they seek to know all about the order of the cosmos and the way things really are. And why do they seek to know it? Because it's not obvious what the truth is. And because your society gives you myths and poetry and all types of illusions and fictions that actually distort your understanding of the true nature of things. So that the philosopher has to come along and kind of clear that all out and think rationally rather than emotionally. They want to know what really is true rather than their own stereotype or bias about what was true, what is true based on how they were raised, right? Aristotle says in the Metaphysics, another important book by Aristotle, he says, since the human being is the rational animal, we all desire to know. And for Aristotle, because the rational part of us is the most distinctly human part, therefore the highest activity we can engage in, as Aristotle understands it, is this word theoria, contemplation, to contemplate and reflect on the nature of things in order to understand them and gain knowledge. Now, obviously, the more you know, it's obviously going to influence your actions. So it does have a benefit for moral virtue. Like if you understand what's really going on in the world around you, you're going to modify the way you think and act about it. Because maybe when you really consider what's going on, I don't know, take for example, the war in Ukraine. The only thing I really know about what's really going on there is that we're not being told the truth, right? I don't believe that we're really being told the truth about what's really going on there. Most of the time, the media spends stoking our emotions. And the moment I see them start trying to stoke my emotions and emotionally manipulate me when I watch the media, I know that they're not telling me the truth, because I've watched enough news to see a pattern that they've established there, that there's a manipulation going on. And so my interesting thought is, I don't really know what the truth is of what's going on in Ukraine, but I know that what the media is telling me is definitely not the whole truth. And it changes the way I act toward about it, right? I don't get so emotionally committed to it in the way the media wants me to be emotionally committed. Because I don't think I really know what's going on. Okay. What is happy? Let's come back to this. Happiness is living virtuously. If there are many virtues, then it's living in accord with the best and most complete one. What is the most complete virtue? The most complete virtue is this thing Aristotle calls theoria. Therefore, what is happiness? This is why you guys aren't getting it. It's not your fault. It's because Aristotle's a little crazy by our standards, I think. He says that human happiness is this life of contemplation, this life of seeking true knowledge about the world and the true nature of, and to determine the true nature of things, right? How many people think that's what happiness is about? Anyone any takers there? And why does it make sense? Because we have this tool called our minds, and it has the power to reason. And the simple logic is that we become fully human when we use our God-given or natural capacity to the fullest. And our distinct capacity that separates us from animals is our reason. So therefore, the life that consists of the fullest use of that tool, that instrument, is the life that brings us happiness. And here for Aristotle, happiness is the fulfillment of our nature. It's realizing our own human potential, right? And Aristotle essentially says that, you know, you are not a human being by virtue of you being born a human being. You are not a human being by virtue of you having human DNA or having 2 arms and 2 legs and standing upright. You are a human being by virtue of your use of your own natural or God-given reason. And the more fully and more completely you use your rational faculty, the more human you are, right? Okay. So then the question becomes, how does friendship fit into this paradigm of happiness as the pursuit of intellectual virtue? And the primary intellectual virtue being contemplation or theoria. That's an interesting question. Here's another interesting question that has been pondered for thousands of years about this book. Moral virtue and intellectual virtue. Aristotle says point blank that intellectual virtue is more important than moral virtue. And it raises the specter of a kind of disturbing question, an awkward question. Can a human being achieve happiness by getting or acting with intellectual virtue, but not moral virtue? Imagine for a moment like the evil genius. They do awful things to other people, but they're the smartest person in a room who's thought most deeply in contemplating about the nature of things. What do people think about that? Do you think Aristotle would I think when we all think of happiness, we think of moral virtue much more than intellectual virtue. Someone mentioned religion. What's interesting about Aristotle is that there is no discussion of religion or faith at all in this book, right? I mean, this is an alternative that he doesn't, well, it gets a little complicated, but I don't want to get it too complicated. He doesn't consider the life of faith as we would understand it, coming from the biblical tradition, as an option for a human being, which you can agree or disagree with, but it's just interesting he doesn't. The two options really are moral and intellectual virtue. And of course, moral virtue is in many ways sympathetic with the biblical understanding of how to live one's life, although his set of virtues isn't it moral virtues, how you should carry yourself, is not exactly consistent with the biblical set of moral virtues of like charity and faith and fear in the Lord and so on and so forth. But he does have a general conception, of the golden rule up to the point. One problem for Aristotle is he does not see human beings as equal. And this is not like a racial commentary or anything like that. It's just that he is willing to recognize that some human beings are better than others, right? So therefore, the way people are treated also has to do with their relative status to one another, right? So equals treat each other in one way, but people who are not equals treat each other and engage in exchange in a different way. Okay, so what we want to get to here is these three forms of friendship. So we finished last class talking about the preconditions for friendship. All human beings lack self-sufficiency, therefore they seek out other people to help satisfy their needs. If you're going to have a relation, what do we mean by preconditions of friendship? Meaning if you don't have these basic things, you cannot have a relationship at all, right? You have to have goodwill, by which he does not mean some selflessness or altruism or charity. What he means is a kind of openness and good-naturedness toward the other person and a basic level of trust that allows you to feel like, I don't know, you're not going to get taken advantage of by the other person. And that allows you to engage in exchange. Like when you go to the Starbucks and you give them your $5 or $6 for your tiny little drink, right? That has your name on it. Like you're not worried about the fact, you don't think they're going to steal your money and not give you your drink, right? You know from the circumstances that you can trust that when you give them your money, you're going to get the drink in return. And, on the other hand, I suppose there's some customers who come in and take the drink and don't pay. You need to have an exchange of goods. And this is the great insight of Aristotle on all human relationships, that they in fact involve an exchange of different types of goods. And we talked about a good bit. I asked for examples of different types of goods that are exchanged in relationships. What are some of the goods that are exchanged in relationships? Remember, there are different types of goods. We're not just talking about consumer goods here, although they would be included. And Aristotle calls a consumer good or wealth, he just calls it an external good. It's something that's literally separable from you, and it has its own physical, independent physical existence. So an external good is money. An external good is, a consumer product that's bought and sold, whatnot. You go over to your neighbor for a cup of sugar, right? That's an external good. Does anybody do that anymore? Go to their neighbor for a cup of sugar? People probably don't even do it anymore. There's not enough goodwill to facilitate that type of relationship. What kinds of goods are exchanged in human relationships? Can we just name a couple of them again? Ladies and gentlemen, what kinds of things do human beings exchange with each other in relationships?
Benefits?
Okay, I'm going to force you to be more specific. A good is basically a benefit in the sense that it's good for you precisely because you believe it will be beneficial for you. Can you be more specific about what types of benefits?
I mean, it depends on what the type of friendship you can have.
I mean, let's hold on a second, right? You're not going to be in a relationship with somebody unless you believe you're getting something from them that's beneficial to you. We kind of established at the end of last class that all students kind of agreed, but Aristotle, I think, certainly agrees that we're basically selfish animals. And when we say that we're self-interested is probably a better expression because selfish has a negative connotation. But to say that you're self-interested is to say that you care about numero uno before everybody else. But if you think about that, and if you think about why it is we care about ourselves the most, it's actually a quite rational position to have. You have a body that's independent of everybody else, and it has needs. And you're the one who's responsible for providing for your own needs once you're an adult. And for the most part, always, to varying degrees, right? So it's only natural that you focus on yourself the most because you're also you're the one who has the needs and you're responsible for satisfying them. So therefore, Aristotle implicitly believes that whenever you get in a relationship with somebody else, you are getting some form of a benefit from them, because if you didn't believe you were getting a benefit, you wouldn't be in that relationship at all, right? You wouldn't be in it. It wouldn't exist. Now, here's the catch. There's some times where you believe you're getting a benefit and it turns out you might not be. That's an interesting one. And there's an issue in book 9, an issue of perception is going to come up. Am I really think about all those relationships you've been in where you're wondering if you're really getting what you thought you were going to get when you entered into it, especially, love relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend type stuff. Okay, so what's exchanged? Ashley says conversation. We exchange words. We are the rational animal. We're the zoon logikon. We're the speaking animal. We exchange words with each other, and it's one of the most powerful things we do as human beings. And this is something that Aristotle emphasizes, that is also emphasized by Sapiens, for example, that our ability to speak is connected with our rational activity. And it's one of the defining features of not just ourselves in our nature, but our relationships. Speech, we all know, is for communication. And therefore communication binds us together in all forms of intimacies. Okay, gifts. We're going to come back to gifts. Love, question mark. Why does love have a question mark next to it? You're not really, Giuliani, you're not really sure whether human beings exchange love?
Yeah. Hi, Professor.
Yes.
I think maybe physically, it might feel like somebody loves you, but inwardly, I think it might not be so.
It may not be so after all.
Right.
That's what he's going to talk about in book 9. A situation, for example, where you think you're getting real love and you ain't. And then questions about, well, what do you do about it? So let me just be clear. In book 8, the image of friendship is static, which means he's just trying to characterize, to classify these 3 types of relationships. But in book 9, he starts talking about the mechanics of real relationships, and that they're changing, and they're in a process of flux. They're not static, they're dynamic. And the fact that and the reason they're dynamic is because our lives are dynamic. If friendships are based on needs, and then the need results in goods exchanged, as we get older, our needs change, and therefore we need different things from relationships. And that can be the cause of breakups of relationships. It can be cause of the creation of new relationships. Okay, so love, absolutely. Care, sure. We do things for one another, right? We are needy animals. We have to take care of our needs, but the one way we take care of our needs is by getting other people to be concerned with our needs, right? And how do we get them concerned with our needs? Well, we concern ourselves with theirs in a reciprocal exchange of concern. Any other things that we exchange in friendships or relationships?
We exchange ideas,
Ideas?
right?
Sure. If we're 2 people pursuing intellectual virtue, we might be exchanging ideas. We might be exchanging knowledge with one another about what we understand about the world around us. And that could go from like really mundane things to like really deep things, just to put it that way. Respect, absolutely, right? We talked about this one part of the soul, thumos, which is translated in English half good as spiritedness. And it's the source in the soul of anger, because anger seems to come from a place where we want to be recognized by the world and other people. We want our will to be recognized by the world and other people. And when it's not, we get angry, right? So respect is a form of recognition, and recognition is an acknowledgement. Got it, Rukeya. It's an acknowledgement of our worth, right? And how many people want other people around them to recognize our own worth as a human being?
Me.
Anybody who doesn't? Anybody who thinks, nah, I don't really need it. I think a lot of myself, and I don't care about other people's opinions. Okay, good, everyone. So the big question is, whose opinion do you respect enough for it to affect you? Whose opinion of your own worth, right? Obviously, for Aristotle, your opinion matters. But here's the complication. Your own opinion of yourself is so intermingled with other people's opinion of you that you can't really totally distinguish them. I mean, this is really what makes us social animals, that your own opinion of yourself can't be separated from close people's opinion. Yeah, so Aristotle's simple answer is exactly what Destiny and Ashley say in the chat, which is that the opinions that should really matter to you, that should define your own sense of self-worth, what we call self-esteem, right? We all know that expression. The people that matter are your real friends, and the ones you really love. And of course, here's the problem with the word friendship as a translation. The Greek word is philia, and it's the root of the city Philadelphia. Does anyone know what Philadelphia means? It's basically a Greek name. What does Philadelphia mean?
The land of friendship.
Close. It's the city of brotherly love, right? The city of brotherly love. So philia can be translated as love. And the key thing here is it's a relationship, and it could be sexual, but it certainly does not have to be, right? So the word philia can be used to describe husbands and wives as much as BFFs, right? As much as relationships between mother and child to some extent. Okay, so the people's opinion we care about are our friends. Okay, so we was talking about respect. Okay, so these are the preconditions. Now what we need to do is we're going to get into understanding these three forms. And I want to look at the model of exchange in just a minute, but I want to say one thing about these three forms. They're really too simple to understand when you understand one thing. Each form of friendship is defined by a different object of exchange. At the beginning of book 8, maybe it's chapter 2, he says there are three things that are lovable. Three things that are lovable. He talks about the good, the pleasant, and the useful. And when he says three things that are lovable, it's kind of like three categories of goods that are beneficial to us and that we like, something like that. So in friendship based on utility, what's exchanged is useful things. Aristotle has a specific meaning of what kinds of things are useful. We'll get to that. Then friendship based on pleasure, obviously the good that's exchanged is some form of pleasure. But remember that there are pleasures of the body and there are also pleasures of the soul, right? And then complete friendship, it's an exchange of the good. And I don't want to say anything more about that, but this is a slightly different meaning of the word good compared to like a good that's exchanged, like a consumer good. It's a little different meaning here. Okay. So this is really how Aristotle envisions relationships. It's a two-way street. Goods of exchange go from yourself to the other, and they go from self to you. And I've just envisioned it as if it's like a packaged good, like literally a gift on a birthday or something like that. And there are some important elements of his understanding of how our relationships with others work. And boy, if you think about these things and you think Aristotle is just kind of like making interesting talk or, being fancy and academic, like if you think about your own relationships in the way Aristotle has described the mechanics of human relationships, I think you realize that what he's saying is just really true. Like he gives you a foundation for seeing how relationships work in practice. Number one, he says, if effectively, he implies this, if there's no good exchanged, or if there's no exchange, there is no relationship, right? You may be in physical proximity with someone, but that doesn't mean you have a relationship or a friendship with them. The goods that can be exchanged are both tangible and intangible. What do we mean by that when we talk about things that are tangible and intangible? What kinds of things are those? Tangible things are what kind of things?
Things that we see and things that we don't see.
Yeah, so tangible things, I normally use like things you can touch and hold. So they are external goods, he would call them. And then intangible things are goods that are invisible, but they're no less real, right? So when someone shows you love, or when someone shows you concern, they don't actually give you something like an object, but they're absolutely doing something for you. And that's pretty apparent. And of course, relationships get really complicated because some of the most important goods are intangible things you can't always put your finger on. And sometimes they're not always so easy to see. And they can also be faked, right? They're also going to, we'll look at this in a moment. There's going to be two types or ways of making exchange. And the differences consist in both what is exchanged, different types of goods, but also the intention behind it, why I believe I'm doing what I'm doing, and particularly who I believe I'm benefiting. So here he talks about the three types of goods that are exchanged: the useful, the pleasant, and the good. And so here, those three types of exchange then define these three different types of friendship. Very simply. There's also a hierarchy. Which form of friendship is the best and highest of the three?
Complete friendship.
Absolutely. Which one is at the bottom? What's the least valuable? Or the one with the least status? Okay, yeah, friendship based on utility, right? Is friendship based on utility necessary for life? Absolutely. You can't do without it. And you deal with it every day. Every day you engage with human beings for the sake of utility, for the sake of what they're offering you is useful. I don't know, you go to the mechanic and have your car fixed and you give them money and they fix your car. That's the exchange. That's very useful because now you can get to work and go to school and you're not stuck, with a car that doesn't work. And you can't buy a new one because car prices are too expensive now with inflation, right? So there's a hierarchy here of these three things that are lovable, where the good is at the top, the pleasant is in the middle, and the useful is at the bottom, right? And these things down here, utility, let me just mention this for a moment. Things that are useful, Aristotle has a very specific meaning behind the concept of something being useful or having utility. And what he calls useful are things that satisfy the basic needs of life and like getting by. So things that are useful are like food and money and,
Shelter.
economy. I'm sorry.
Shelter.
What's that?
Shelter. Shelter.
Yeah, shelter. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So all those things that satisfy your basic necessities, he describes as useful, right? And so here, these relationships, these lower two, satisfy more basic needs, but they're less human. If you think about, we need money, food, and shelter, you're talking about things that other animals need too. But as we get up to complete friendship, we're talking about satisfying maybe desires more than needs that have to do with not just mere life, but satisfying the good life, happiness, right? I mean, this part is about survival, and this part is about living happily, right? Because of course we can survive without being happy. It's not a very satisfying situation, but it can be done. Okay, so let's go forward here. The first form of exchange, and when I talk about these two forms of exchange now, they have to do with the way we approach the relationship, or what I'm calling the intention behind it, how we understand this relationship, right? In the first form of exchange, I give something to the other person, right? However, I'm just going to read this. I do it with the expectation that I'm gonna get something in return. Okay, so here, that's me. I'm wearing a skirt, but that's okay. And I give something to you. Now, why do I give it to you? I don't give it because I love you. I don't give it to you because I want to make you happy. I'm giving you this because when I give you this, you're going to give me back that. And what I really want is that you're going to give me back. Can anyone think of examples of relationships where the only reason you do something for the other person is so you can get something in return? And here I don't necessarily mean friendships. I mean like relationships of all kinds. Because when Aristotle talks about relationships or friendships based on utility, he's talking about really things that don't relationships that don't necessarily involve a tremendous amount of intimacy. So Ashley says a work relationship. Can you give an example of what you might do for someone else and at work simply because you want something in return?
You can be a receptionist and, do your job to the best ability. So maybe you get a promotion or something like that, I guess.
Yeah. The boss tells you, this is what your job is. Go do it. And you don't do it because you like your boss and you're in love with them or you're concerned for their well-being. You do it because you want to get paid and you want to get a promotion. So the only reason you're sitting at that desk, I mean, hopefully you like your job and all that, but the reason you're sitting at that desk and giving them your time and energy and effort is because you're expecting that paycheck. I mean, if you think about it, work by definition is exactly this situation where you wouldn't be doing that work if you weren't guaranteed a paycheck by law at the end of it, right? Any other examples you can think of
Hey,
situation?
Professor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I pay my school fees to go to school, so my professors will teach me.
Yeah, sure. Your professors don't really want to. They don't do it for the love of teaching. They do it because they get a paycheck. No, I'm just kidding. Paycheck helps.
Right.
A bigger one would be even better, but it doesn't matter. Sure. Any other examples? Yeah, coworker asks you for a shift changed, and you go, you know what? I'll let you switch shifts with me, but in a week from now, I'm going to ask you to do me pay the favor back, right? And when you start getting this idea of an exchange, you realize that there's like an account system here, right? It's like a banking system where we talked about there has to be reciprocity and equality. Exchange has to be reciprocal in the sense that it goes both ways or it's going to break down. If you find that you're doing all the exchanging and you're not getting anything in return, you're going to sit there and go, wait a second, what am I doing here? I am using up my life's resources and not getting anything in return. That's not a good deal. That's bad cost benefit analysis. Then on the other hand, the exchange has to be equal, right? So if you keep covering for your coworker's shift and it's like taking up, that's a whole day, a whole shift, which is like your whole day, basically could be a half a day, whatever it is. And they're not paying you back in equal terms, or what you consider to be equal terms, the exchange is not going to hold up, right? Any other examples of this? Where you do something for the other person, you give them something solely with the expectation in mind that you're going to get something back.
Professor, I have another example. My culture, people always go to funerals because they have at the back of their mind that when they are also bereaved, other people will also come.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I think in our culture we have that to varying degrees too. You come to their funerals. Well, situation of a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? When you're down and out, you want the support, and one way to get that support is to give it to them in advance. Okay, so gift giving is an interesting thing, and we'll have to talk about that more. because obviously when we give a gift, we typically expect something back at some point. But if we want to be really technical about the meaning of a gift, it's interesting, and it's different from this first form in terms of its intention. So let's be clear. This first form, in terms of the intent, where I give based on the expectation of return, that really is, by definition, what's happening in friendship based on utility and friendship based on pleasure. And here's the big, sorry about that. Here's the big concern when we engage in this form of exchange. And it's right down here. What I'm really concerned about in this relationship is not the other person. What I'm really concerned about is getting what I need from them. And what I need from them is not them. It's something that they're giving me, right? You know, you go to Starbucks, you take out your money, you get the coffee. I don't need the attention of the barista. What I need is the coffee that they're making for me. So other than that, you know, I don't want to be involved with them, right? I don't want to know the intimate details of their life that they want to try to tell me because I don't know, they think I'll listen to them or something like that, right? So it's interesting. In these forms, they're more impersonal, and your engagement with the other person is about what they have. What is that? Is it The Godfather? I can't remember what movie is it. So what can you do for me? Right? It's not about who you are. It's about what you can do for me. And of course, we talked last class about, you know, using people, right? But we should be careful when we talk about using people because there's different degrees of that. The reality is we have to use everybody all the time, right? We have to depend on them because we need their help. I don't know, the plumber comes over and fixes something, and then you pay them. You're using them to get the thing fixed, and they're using you to make some money, right? Nobody thinks there's anything nefarious about that or untoward because everybody understands the nature of the interaction. The problem with using people is when you pretend to care about the other person for them, and when you really only care about getting what you want from them, and you don't really care about them. And in book 9, that's the exact kind of thing Aristotle's going to start talking about and how we handle those kinds of situations. Okay. The second, do I not have it here? Oh, I put it down. Okay. So the second form of exchange has us treating the other person in a different way. And up to this point, this first form of exchange where we just want what we want, we treat the other person as a means rather than an end in themselves. We don't care about them for their own sake. We care about what they can do for us, right? So we treat them as a means, not as an end. What's another name for a means? It's a synonym.
Ways.
Yeah, ways. Means and ways. What's another synonym? What does a carpenter use to hammer the nail? I know it's a hammer, but what's the generic category of object that the hammer represents? It's a what? Yeah, it's a tool, right? And what is a tool? It's just an instrument we use to get what we want or to achieve our desired goal. And here's the issue here is that what we really want, what our goal is, what our end, what our telos is not the other person. What we want is the thing that they have to offer us. Right? So Immanuel Kant, an 18th century moral philosopher, says this about how we should treat other human beings. And Aristotle almost completely agrees with this statement, and that we should aspire to live in accord with this statement. And he says, for rational beings all stand under the law. All right, rational beings, he means human beings, right? Because we're the only being that's rational. For rational beings all stand under the law, and this is his law of human conduct. It's kind of his version of the golden rule, okay? He says that every human being ought to treat themselves and others never merely as a means, but also at the same time as an end in themselves. Should I say it again?
Yes.
Because the way he says it, I don't like it. I'm trying to paraphrase. Human beings should follow the rule of conduct that they should treat both themselves and others never merely as a means, but always also as an end in themselves. So you should do this for others and yourself. We already know what it means to treat other people as a means. We're treating them as a tool, as an instrument, as a way, a method of fulfilling a desire that is something independent of them. I'm using the person to get money, whatever it is. What does it mean to treat someone as an end in themselves?
Treating somebody just like you treating yourself.
Hopefully, right? I mean, he kind of acknowledges here that it's not necessary that we do that. If we have a low opinion of ourselves, we will allow ourselves to be used by other people. True or false?
Wait, I come again.
If we have a lower opinion of ourselves, we allow ourselves to be used by other people.
Yes.
I mean, I think absolutely. So we reduce ourselves to a tool. I'll just say, I had a best friend who's been like going through a breakup. And the one thing he kind of discovered at a certain point as the relationship was deteriorating was, in a kind of subtle way, but a pretty clear way, he was really being taken advantage of. And he didn't want to acknowledge this to himself because, of course, it doesn't feel good to acknowledge it. But to put it simply, he was being used in a certain way. And he entered the relationship under the premise of intimacy and companionship and love. And the other person seemed to start out that way, but over time it changed. And what it became is he was the good guy who provided for stuff, and she asked for favors and he did them. But then he realized he wasn't getting anything in return for all the favors he did. And she kept asking for the favors. Right? And guess what happened to the relationship? The exchange got disequilibrium. I don't, I only know what he tells me, so who knows what the full picture of the relationship really was and what really happened. But I'm really just using it as an example. You can flip the boy girl around the other way, and boys do bad things too. We all know. They're much worse than girls. And so anyway, what did it culminate in? It culminated in the end of the relationship, because from his point of view, he realized that the concern was not for him. The concern that she seemed to have was really what he could do for her. It's a big difference. Okay. What does it mean to treat someone as an end in themselves? What does it say about how you care about them? When you treat someone as an end for their own sake, how do you treat them? That's why I'm asking, because this language, this expression is kind of awkward, but I think we actually know what this really means. We just don't realize it. When you treat someone as an end in themselves, how are you treating them? What really matters to you? Is it what they give you or something else?
Professor, I think that means to accomplish something.
Maybe. I mean, it's more, well, now let's back up a second. Come on, folks, let's reboot here. We all have acknowledged, I see the comments that using someone is not really recognizing their worth as a human being, right? There's something wrong about that. And what does Aristotle say? He says we must treat each other as means and use other people, but we must also treat people as ends. Why does Aristotle acknowledge the means part? Because we have to treat other people as means. We have to use people to get by in the world. Both Aristotle and Kant say that's okay, but it's also vital that we also treat them as an end in themselves. What would be the opposite of using someone? What would we care about if we're not using someone in that way? Let me ask an obvious question. How many people want to be used by their significant other and taken advantage of?
Nobody.
And everybody else? What's your answer? How many people want to be used like a tool for the right answers on the test? And the person pretends they actually like you when all they want is the answers on the test. Okay, so if that's what you don't want, what is it that you do want? How do you want to be treated if that's the way you don't want to be treated? All right. You want to be appreciated. What do you mean by that? Can we say a little more? You want to be appreciated how? You want to be appreciated for what? What do you want to be loved? Look, in utility and pleasure, why are these two relationships less important than the top complete friendship? Because the thing the other person loves is not you. It's what you give them that's somehow distinguishable from you.
Yeah.
What do you want the other person to love? That's not rocket science. You're all human beings, right?
Yeah, not to love
Yeah,
me,
me, right? To say you should be you should treat each other as an end is simply to say you should love that person for who they are, right? To love them rather than simply what they offer you under the premise that these things can be separated, right? When you think about this, it's very easy to look at your own relationships and discern what people really want from you. Do they want you for your own sake as an end in yourself? Or do they want something you offer that's not really directly you? And when Aristotle says you as an end in yourself, what he means is your character. He means what kind of human being you are, morally, intellectually, and so on. You want to be loved for who you are. You want to be loved for yourself. and not for the fact that, I don't know, you happen to have a swimming pool in the backyard and people start calling you up and say, yo, can I come over? I really want to hang out with you tonight. And then when they get there, they go, oh, can we get in the pool? They're not there for you. Exactly. They're there for the swimming pool,
Mhm.
right? Something like that. Or whatever it is. I mean, does everybody have an example in their own life where they discovered that what the person wanted from them turned out not to really be them? It turned out not to really be you. And they wanted something else, something just that you offered that wasn't you. Nobody's had that happen to them before? Does anyone have does anyone have an example that's like, for public consumption? Woo. Okay. So let's look at this for a second, and we can read a little bit in a moment and wrap things up. In friendship based on utility, we exchange useful things. We've talked about that. And this relationship turns out to be unstable. It doesn't last a long time. And of course, these two are connected. Any thoughts about why this relationship doesn't last a long time?
Because the friendship of pleasure is a temporary thing.
Pardon?
Because it's more of a temporary thing. Like
Yeah,
body
why is
pleasure-
it temporary? Oh, yeah, we could include both these two in this issue of fact that they're both short and unstable. Why is friendship based on pleasure temporary? What makes it temporary? Let's go with pleasure, actually. And let's just say the pleasure is physical pleasure, like sex,
Mhm.
to, sharpen the example. Why is it unstable and short?
Yeah, Professor, I think once the other party is not able to provide exactly what the other one wanted, or once it's that thing is no more, I think the opportunist is going to back up.
I think you're on the right track. The person who wants you for physical pleasure, what do they not want you for?
everything else. They just want you for that one aspect of.
Yeah, they don't want you for you. And this, the perfect example is friends with benefits, right? They want to have physical access to you because it's pleasurable, but they're not willing to commit to a real relationship. And the committing to a real relationship would be a signal that they don't just want you for pleasure, they want you for you. And then there happens to be pleasure with it, right? The two kind of normally or should go hand in hand. And the reason why is because friends with benefits, they don't really care about you. They just care about the fact that they can use your body to get the pleasure they want for a period of time. Well, number one, that's not satisfying for the person who's being used for their physical pleasure, who might well want to be liked for who they are themselves. They want to be liked for the, most people have a very tough time engaging in physical intimacy without the additional guarantee that that person really wants to be with them and not just anybody. They want to know that they're actually liked. That's why we have all this ritual of mating with each other, and people go out on dates and, is this guy really a jerk? Does he really like me? That's why you give the boys, or you should give them a hard time, and you try to figure out what their intentions really are, right? He's acting very nice right now, but why is that? Is it because he really likes me for who I am? He doesn't even know me yet. How could he like me for who I am, right? Or does he just want sex? And so of course he's acting nice. Well, what's Aristotle points this out about who we find attractive and sexual desire. What happens with sexual desire? Since the relationship of pleasure is, let's just say it's based on sexual desire, although there are other forms of pleasure he talks about. What's the problem with sexual desire as a foundation for a relationship? He explains it perfectly. What happens? How does physical attraction with people work? One day, a boy or a girl finds somebody attractive. What happens the next day?
He finds someone else who's physically attractive as well.
Hell yeah, because it's just an animal impulse that comes and goes as it pleases, right? I was at the party. I had a few drinks. The person looked really cute at the time, but guess what? Now it's the next week and I found somebody else who looks cute when I have a drink, right? So it fluctuates, it changes,
And
right?
both applications.
Okay. Question. What is exchanged in complete friendship? Now we know it's, quote, the good, but what the heck does that mean? And I'm going to go back to the chart that doesn't have all the answers in it. What is exchanged? Okay, in utility, money, goods, work for money, it's all really clear. Pleasure could be pleasures of the body, like sex, but it could also be pleasures of the soul. He gives an example of finding someone witty or humorous. And the idea is that their wit or humor gives you pleasure. And it's not really quite about them. It's just about the fact that they make you laugh, but what you're made to like is not really them exactly, but kind of their amusing behavior. What kind of good is exchanged in complete friendship? Did anyone figure that out? Another way to put it is, what do complete friends do for each other? Believe? That's not enough. Aristotle's not, he's not biblical. I mean, of course, he's a Greek. Like there is no Bible here, right? He's writing this in the 4th century BC, before Jesus. He has no contact with the biblical culture in the Near East and the Middle East. He's not much for belief. He's not much for faith. He's about understanding and reasoning. Cooperation is on the right path. What do people do? And remember, which one of these helps you realize your own happiness? Which relationship? Which one of these 3 helps you realize your own happiness for Aristotle? Is it friendship based on utility, friendship based on pleasure, or complete friendship?
The first one.
Absolutely, complete friendship. What's another name that we could give to complete friendship that we all are familiar with?
A real friend?
Yeah, or true friendship, right?
Or
Or
best
real,
friend.
same word. And let's be clear, it turns out that the other 2 forms are not,
Battery is running low.
he says
The
these
battery
other
is
two
running low.
forms,
Close button to activate. Press space bar. Alt followed by C.
Sorry.
that's okay. He says that these other two forms of friendship are only friendship incidentally. And he seems to be saying it's like we call them forms of friendship, but they're not really friendship at all. They're relationships, which is something different. We can have relationships with anybody, right? But complete friendship is true friendship. And complete friendship is crucial to understand because this is the thing that's going to help us fulfill our own happiness, right? Now, if this is the relationship, look, when he writes this stuff, he's not writing for a classroom. Well, he kind of is, but that's another story. He's writing for real life. He's trying to provide guidance to
Zoom
human
meeting
beings.
mute. Currently unmuted. Alt plus A button.
He's trying to provide guidance on how people should actually live their lives in order for them to be happy, because who doesn't want to be happy? So then we better know what this complete friendship is if this is the thing that's going to allow us to achieve our own happiness. Do we have any thoughts about what we actually exchange in complete friendship? First of all, I'll go to this. How do we treat each other in complete friendship? Are we just using each other as a means?
No.
No. What are we doing?
Treating each other as ourselves.
You're actually on the right track, but that's a little too fancy for right now. We'll get, I think next class, we're going to have to talk about what this thing complete means and why he uses this word. For now, we can just think of it in terms of as true friendship. Do we use the other person as a means, or do we treat them as an end in themselves in complete friendship?
As an end themselves.
Absolutely. We love them for who they are. And there's going to be a really interesting reason why we love them for who they are. What kind of person are they going to be? Are they going to be a good person or a bad person?
Good person.
A good person.
Absolutely. Why do we love them for who they are? Because they are a virtuous human being. By definition, a person who is virtuous is one who's going to be lovable and who we should extend our affections to themselves. Think about this. Do we love the person that we engage with for the sake of utility? Do we care about whether they're a good or bad person?
No.
I mean, maybe for the sake of a low level of trust, but the answer is not really, right? What we care about when we go to Starbucks is not how virtuous this barista is. We don't want them to spit in our drink, but all we care about is that they perform their job. We give money, they give coffee in return. Simple as that. Here's the problem with friendship based on pleasure of friends with benefits. You're not really taking into consideration what type of person, what type of character that human being has, right? You know, don't judge a book by its cover. It implies that there's a cover and then there's an inside, right? In complete friendship, what you care about is not the cover, but the inside. And the inside of the person in complete friendship is a righteous human being, right? A virtuous human being. Let me ask again. What do we actually exchange in complete friendship? Does anyone have the foggiest clue? Niet, said Putin. Okay, so here we're going to finish today, and finally we're going to have a class where we finish before 9:30. I'm not going to tell you what's exchanged in complete friendship, but let me tell you, it's really crucial for the exam to know what's exchanged in complete friendship. And we'll come back to it next class, and then we'll move into book 9. Because book 9, honestly, is the really exciting part that you're gonna sink your teeth into book 9, especially once we start reading it. Complete friendship has a different, the two people approach the relationship differently in terms of their intentions. And I'm just going to read this here. In this second form, and this form deals with complete friendship. In this second form of exchange, I give to the other person, and I do it without the expectation of return. I'm giving a gift. Okay. What is it? What is a gift? And I don't mean in terms of like what kind of object constitutes a gift, because a gift could be anything. But what do we mean when we say we give someone a gift? What are we really talking about here? That we're giving a gift has to do with the intention behind how we give something to another person. When you go to Starbucks, is the money that you give to the barista a gift?
No.
Why not?
Because
we are buying.
I'm giving in return of something. I'm giving out the money in return of the coffee. So
okay, so if that's not a gift, then what is a gift?
Something that you will give, something that is not reciprocal.
Okay, so it's you give, but it's not reciprocated. Mama Kadi, you wanna chime in there?
Something that is free for me.
That is what?
Free. You
Free.
don't have.
Yeah, sure. So here's the thing. In complete friendship, I give a gift. What is a gift here? It's giving something to the other person with no clear expectation that they pay you back, right? Think about, you make a loan to someone. When you make a loan to that person, a loan is a loan. You expect the money back. That's why you call it a loan. If you say, I'll give you money as a gift, what you're saying is you don't really have to pay me back, right? Now, here's the rub. When in complete friendship, by definition, both people have to be virtuous. They have to be good people. They have to be excellent human beings. They have to have good character, right? The one person gives a gift to the other person, and guess what the other person does? They do end up giving a gift back in return. Now, the question is that nobody's been able to answer is, what is the gift that we give? And especially because we've just talked about the fact that Aristotle understands all human action as basically self-interested. And when we talk about a gift, it sounds like you're giving something away without getting anything in return. It turns out, however, that when you give this gift, whatever it is, because nobody's been able to say what it is, Aristotle tells you, and it's really important to know what it is, and it will make sense when you know what it is. The point is, when you give this gift, you do a benefit for the other person for their own sake, precisely because you're not asking for anything back. On the other hand, it turns out that because of the nature of what you're giving them, it's by definition beneficial to you, the person who gives the gift. But I'm not going to tell you what it is if nobody can figure it out. Not until next class, or someone's going to tell me what it is next class. Thoughts, questions, comments? All right. There's two things I want you to think about for next class, and they're both essential components of the midterm question dealing with Aristotle's ethics and the three forms of friendship, which is the basic question. Number one, incomplete friendship. Please, next week, you got to tell me what is the thing exchanged in complete friendship, or at least what kind of thing is it? Yes, there are benefits, but here's the problem. Everything that everybody exchanges in relationships are technically benefits because they're goods that benefit the other person or benefit you by definition. So the question is, what kind of benefit is it? When you talk about these three relationships, the three different relationships are defined by three different types of benefit or good that's exchanged. The good, the pleasurable, and the useful, right? So the first question is, what is exchanged in this relationship? When you get it, you'll go, oh, of course, I get it. I should have known that. Then the other thing is, why is it called complete friendship? What is that all about? It's a strange term, complete friendship. And what do we mean? I think somebody talked about completion, that these friends complete each other or something like that. And that kind of answer is at least on the right track of why it's called complete friendship. And next week, I'd like you to think about the answer to that, but next week we'll clarify what Aristotle means by complete, because it's an important concept here at work that needs to be understood. Okay, so we're going to stop it right here. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions, comments before we sign off?
For next week, Professor, do we have reading responses assigned?
No. So there's no new reading response. That's it. But you've got more time to read and digest chapters 8 and 9 because they're really essential for the exam. And next week, a lot of the things we're talking about should be clearer after you've spent some more time with the text.
Okay.
And we'll read some things out loud. Any other questions or comments before we go? Alrighty, great. All right, so we'll see everybody back. We'll deal with complete friendship, and then we will move on to book 9. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Zoom meeting.
Professor. Bye-bye.